Imagine this. You wake up in a room bathed in soft morning light, the kind that wraps around your skin like a quiet promise. The bed beneath you is warm, inviting, and you could stay wrapped in its embrace indefinitely. Outside, the world hums with the familiar rhythm of safe routines, a commute with predictable traffic, a job that pays enough to keep the worries manageable, relationships that don't demand the unraveling of your soul. Comfort, in its gentle yet unyielding way, lulls you into a state of ease. But then a question blooms inside you, sharp and invasive, like a splinter beneath your skin. What if this comfort is the cage, not the sanctuary? What if the ease that cradles you now is the thief that steals your meaning? You blink, unsettled by the paradox. The very things designed to protect you from discomfort, from pain, from uncertainty, may also be the chains that keep your life from truly living. The contradiction is cruel and magnificent. Comfort offers relief, but it can also necrotize the spirit. The more you shield yourself from struggle, the more you risk anesthetizing your capacity for depth. You start to wonder if a life unconfronted by hardship is a life half-lived, or perhaps no life at all. Is it possible, then, to choose meaning over comfort? To step out of the warm, predictable cocoon and into a reality that demands everything from you: your courage, your conviction, your vulnerability? Or does meaning itself reside somewhere inside comfort's soft borders, waiting quietly to be discovered, like a hidden note beneath a familiar melody? This tension gnaws at you because it is not just theoretical, it is visceral. The pull of comfort is magnetic, deeply wired into your neurochemistry. It promises calm, safety, predictability, the fundamental conditions for survival. Meanwhile, meaning wears a more daunting face. It calls for disruption, sacrifice, unruly passion, the willingness to confront chaos. These opposing forces coalesce inside you like twin storms, each claiming allegiance, neither dissipating in easy surrender. How often do you find yourself trapped in this liminal space, awake to the truth that the life you lead is cushioned, yet hollow, that your days are filled with tasks and pleasures that numb rather than ignite? You may find your passions muted, your dreams deferred, because the price of pursuing them feels exorbitant. The cost of leaving comfort is uncertainty itself, the vast and terrifying unknown. But what is the cost of staying? Imagine the man who wakes every morning and chooses this very dilemma not as a philosophical abstraction but as a lived reality. He can have comfort. There are paths laid out for him, roads well trod by those who settle for security, but he senses an emptiness gnawing at the edges of all that ease. For him, comfort is a slow poison, meaning a fierce elixir. To embrace meaning, he must relinquish not just physical ease but the psychological safety net that comfort affords. What does it take to trade the known for the unknown so radically? To risk alienation, failure, loneliness, sometimes all three at once? This predicament is not a luxury reserved for the restless elite or the tortured artist. It is the human condition writ large. Every choice carries an undercurrent of uncertainty. The easier path often looks like a promise, but sometimes hides a slow death of the soul. The harder path offers the possibility of growth, but yields no guarantees. This is the paradox we live in, the one that refuses to be solved by platitudes or the fleeting pleasure of distraction. Why does this paradox unsettle you so? Because it demands an honest reckoning with your own values, your priorities, your fears. It forces you to ask, what does it mean to live well? Is it enough to avoid pain, to secure comfort? Or is there a deeper call inside you, that restless, quiet voice whispering of something more? Something that demands not comfort but confrontation, not stasis but transformation. Feel the weight of this question pressing down, not as an abstract puzzle but as a matter of survival. For there is a slow suffocation in lives built around comfort alone, a gradual erosion of purpose that leaves a barren landscape where your spirit should flourish. Meaning is not a luxury, it is the oxygen of the soul. Without it, comfort becomes a cruel irony, a gilded cage from which you long to escape but lack the courage to try. You might ask yourself, what would it mean to choose meaning over comfort, to live deliberately with all the mess and glory that entails? Can you imagine waking up one day and deciding that the pursuit of a deeper truth, of authentic passion, is worth the loss of ease and certainty? What would that life look like, sound like, feel like? Would it be terrifying, exhilarating, both? This is the crucible where the man who chose meaning over comfort was forged, not in some distant myth, but in the raw terrain of a life lived with eyes wide open. In the stark light of this crucible, he confronted the fundamental questions that most of us bury beneath routine and distraction. Who am I beyond my comforts? What am I willing to suffer for the sake of my soul's integrity? What legacy do I want to leave behind, if not one of simple survival? Before you can understand his journey, you must dwell in this tension, feel it fully, and reckon with its implications. Because the story that follows is not just about a man. It is a mirror held up to your own life. It demands an answer to that eternal, unsettling question. If given the choice, would you embrace meaning over comfort, even when it costs everything you thought you valued? This question is your entry point into a journey that refuses easy resolutions. It is the door into a narrative that will challenge your assumptions, provoke your fears, and perhaps, if you dare to listen, awaken something neglected deep within you. The man who chose meaning over comfort did not do so lightly, nor did he find it without pain. But in that choice, he found a life that roared with a vitality the comfortable have never known. And so, standing at this precipice of possibility, you are called to look beyond the gentle glow of comfort's lamp and peer into the wild, flickering fire of meaning. What you find there may surprise you. What you lose there may terrify you. But what you gain there could change everything. Are you ready to step forward? Because the story is only just beginning. You feel it, don't you? That silent tug beneath the surface of your consciousness, a whisper that unsettles the neatly arranged order of your daily life. It's the disquiet of something unresolved, a quiet ache that no amount of distraction or ease seems to soothe. But why is this? Why does the soul rebel against comfort, even as the body craves it? To understand the man who chose meaning over comfort, you must first unearth this paradox, this invisible force that shapes the trajectory of human existence in ways both profound and terrifying. Look closely, and you'll see it writ large across the annals of human thought, from the shadow-haunted chambers of Carl Jung's psyche to the stark abyssal reflections of Friedrich Nietzsche. Jung spoke of the archetypes buried deep within us, figures of ancient power and mystery that call us to confront ourselves honestly, to step into the chaos of the unknown rather than retreat into the safety of the familiar. The shadow, he called it, the dark companion of the self that no amount of comfort can exile forever. It lurks there, demanding recognition, threatening madness if ignored. Isn't it curious then how we expend so much energy to cloak ourselves in illusions of comfort? We build walls, literal and metaphorical, around our lives, careers designed for security, relationships maintained by convenience, routines that anesthetize the gnawing hunger for something more. Yet beneath this tapestry of ease, the shadow waits. It waits because our psyche knows what philosophical inquiry has long acknowledged. A life unexamined is a life half-lived, a phantasm confined within the sterile bounds of survival. Nietzsche famously declared, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." But where is this why today in a world seduced by the promise that comfort equals happiness? We chase pleasure, avoidance of pain, and the soothing light of routine, yet these are but shadows on the cave wall. The deeper why requires facing suffering, ambiguity, and the inherent meaninglessness that Schopenhauer believed underpins existence. For Schopenhauer, the will itself is irrational, a ceaseless striving that can never be fully satisfied, condemning us to an endless cycle of desire and disappointment. Comfort, then, is the thin veil we draw to mask the void. Does this not explain the ubiquitous unease that pervades modern life, this epidemic of restlessness and dissatisfaction. Aldous Huxley foresaw it in his prophetic visions, how technological progress and material plenty could breed a new kind of malaise, a spiritual emptiness disguised by consumption and spectacle. The Brave New World is not only the dystopia of external controls, but the internally imposed tyranny of complacency, where the soul is starved by a surfeit of trivial comforts. Yet comfort seduces us not only because it feels good, but because it promises identity. It offers a script for who we are: worker, consumer, caretaker, achiever, roles that simplify the chaos within. Jean-Paul Sartre ripped this away with brutal clarity, exposing the human condition as radical freedom and therefore radical responsibility. To choose comfort is to deny this freedom, to choose the bad faith of self-deception, where one evades the burden of creating meaning and instead becomes a hollow echo of societal expectation. Imagine for a moment the unbearable weight of freedom Sartre described. The man who chooses meaning over comfort does so knowing that his every decision will carve out an identity from the void, that he must face the abyss without flinching. He rejects the anesthetic of convenience, accepting pain as the price, not of failure, but of authenticity. Viktor Frankl, who lived through the unthinkable terrors of concentration camps, distilled this in his existential psychology. Meaning is found not in comfort or success, but in response to suffering, in the stance one takes toward unavoidable hardship. You begin to see how this hidden force operates beneath the surface of everyday life, an undercurrent that disrupts the easiest path and whispers of something greater. It is no accident that the man you are coming to know feels this pull so precisely and irresistibly. He is not merely defying comfort for rebellion's sake, but answering a call rooted in the deepest structures of existence, psychological, philosophical, and spiritual. This call demands confrontation with what we fear most: emptiness, suffering, the void of meaninglessness. This tension between comfort and meaning is not just a personal dilemma, it is a universal crucible. It shapes societies, cultures, and epochs. The rise and fall of civilizations, the revolutions of consciousness, the great works of art and philosophy, all bear the imprint of this struggle. The man who chooses meaning over comfort is both a product of and participant in this eternal drama, and his story is an invitation to you to join the reckoning. But beware, the cost is high. To gaze into the abyss is to risk being consumed by it. The comfort you abandon may never return. The meaning you seek may prove elusive or shatter your illusions about who you believe yourself to be. Yet, the alternative is sterility, a slow decay of spirit beneath the veneer of ease. The hidden force that propels this choice is both a torment and a gift, a paradox at the core of human identity, forever demanding that we wrestle with the question: what does it mean to be truly alive? As you stand on the edge of this understanding, ready to witness his journey, know this: the man who chose meaning over comfort is not an anomaly but a mirror. His struggle reveals the silent war raging within you, the battle that every human being must face, whether they recognize it or not. And in that recognition lies the possibility of awakening, of a life that burns not with the flicker of comfort's lamp, but with the fierce and unyielding fire of meaning. You may not notice it at first, the subtle pull beneath the surface of your thoughts, the quiet shaping of your choices, the unseen hands guiding you toward a safer, softer shore. But the tension between meaning and comfort is no mere philosophical abstraction. It is woven into the very fabric of your mind, your biology, and the culture that surrounds you like an invisible cage. Think about this. Your brain is an organ engineered for survival first and foremost. It is a vigilant sentinel that scans the environment for threats and rewards, tirelessly working to keep you alive and comfortable. Comfort is neurologically privileged. It floods your system with dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins, those chemicals that, moment to moment, whisper reassurance and safety. Meaning, however, is a far more elusive quarry. It is a complex tapestry woven from purpose, struggle, and a relentless questioning of your place in the cosmos. Meaning demands effort, uncertainty, and often pain. It is a higher-order pursuit that the brain does not innately prefer. It does not reward meaning with the instant gratification that comfort delivers. Here lies the first of many silent traps: cognitive bias. Your mind favors the near term. It seeks immediacy and avoidance of discomfort. The availability heuristic makes you overestimate the value of the familiar, the known, the cozy. The status quo bias lulls you into inertia, persuading you that to stay put is better than to risk the unknown. Loss aversion tightens its grip, tightening your fists around what you have rather than reaching toward what might be. And yet, what is this comfort you cling to? Is it merely the absence of pain, or is it something more insidious, a dullness, a sedation of your potential? The comfort that your mind craves is often a mirage that dulls your senses and numbs your spirit. It lures you into a twilight zone where life shrinks to habitual routines, a series of small satisfactions that fail to ignite the soul. This is the neurological prison that culture, too, reinforces. Culture is a whispering chorus that tunes your internal compass. It sings songs of safety and conformity, of success measured in possessions, titles, and temporary pleasures. From the moment you are born, you are immersed in a collective narrative shaped by history, media, and social norms, one that often equates comfort with happiness and meaning with a luxury few can afford to seek. The cultural script is not silent about comfort. It shouts from billboards, streams from screens, and pulses through social validation. Meaning, by contrast, is more likely to be relegated to the margins, framed as existential angst, radical idealism, or a burden for the brave. Neurologically, this cultural conditioning becomes encoded in your brain's architecture. Neural pathways grow stronger with repetition. The habit of choosing comfort becomes a well-trodden road that is easier to traverse than the overgrown, difficult path toward meaning. This is why, even as a whisper deep inside you yearns for something more, your daily reality often bends toward ease. You may imagine yourself as a free agent, unshackled and sovereign. Yet, the data on human behavior tells a different story. Social conformity studies reveal how the pressure to belong can override even the clearest personal insights. Groupthink, the tendency to suppress dissent to maintain harmony, anesthetizes the individual's quest for deeper truth. Media saturation, with its algorithmic tailoring, creates echo chambers that limit exposure to challenging ideas. The comfort of consensus becomes a tranquilizer, muting the call of meaning until it is but a faint echo. Can you feel the weight of this unconscious captivity? The silent but potent forces that corral your mind into a comfortable cage, while the possibility of a more profound existence flickers like a distant star. This is no small matter. It is the crucible in which personal and societal realities are forged. Societies that prize safety and predictability over questioning and sacrifice stagnate. They breed cynicism, apathy, and a restless unease beneath the surface calm. Individuals trapped in this dynamic find themselves adrift, suffocated by superficial pleasures yet haunted by an undefined emptiness. The urgency of escape is palpable, though often masked. The mind blinks in and out of clarity, catching glimpses of a horizon beyond comfort's borders, sometimes in moments of heartbreak, loss, or profound beauty. These are crisis points when the veneer cracks and the silent war within erupts into consciousness. But without a framework to understand this pull, the majority retreat, doubling down on comfort's promise. You might ask, why do you keep returning to comfort knowing it leaves you unfulfilled? Why does the easier road still beckon so powerfully? It is because the human brain evolved in an environment of scarcity, danger, and uncertainty, where the cost of risk was often fatal. This evolutionary wiring doesn't just haunt your biology. It infiltrates your psyche and culture, creating a multi-layered trap that is difficult to detect and even harder to escape. Yet in this very struggle, between the instinctual hunger for comfort and the soul's cry for meaning, there lies a paradox as old as humanity itself. The trap you face is also a threshold. The chains that bind are also the gauntlet you must run through to be reborn into awareness. But the key to unlocking this prison is not found in a mere intellectual understanding. It is an internal reckoning that challenges every assumption you hold about yourself, your desires, and your fears. As you wrestle with this invisible architecture, the neurological, cognitive, and cultural scaffolding that shapes your reality, know this: the battle is both personal and universal. It is a war fought in the quiet recesses of your mind and echoed in the tumult of the world outside. The stakes are nothing less than your soul's awakening or its quiet suffocation beneath the tide of routine. Now standing at this cusp, sense the tremor of possibility. The call to meaning is louder than ever, but so is the siren song of comfort. The question is no longer abstract or distant. Will you recognize the trap for what it is? Will you choose to step beyond the seductive glow of ease and risk the uncertainty, the chaos, and the pain that may birth a life lived with fierce, relentless purpose? The breakthrough waits, silent and patient, just beyond the edge of your surrender to ease. But before you step through, you must feel the trap in its full weight, the gravity of its pull and the depth of its deception. Only then will the choice become truly yours. What if everything you believed about comfort, about safety, about fulfillment, the very map you've been navigating by, was a lie? Not a malicious one, but a systemic illusion, a grand narrative spun to keep you docile and tethered. Imagine that the invisible chains you've come to accept as necessary boundaries are actually self-imposed bars forged from fear and habit disguised as reason. What if the pursuit of comfort is not your sanctuary but your cage? And this realization could be the fulcrum on which your entire existence pivots. This is not merely a philosophical musing. It's a radical upheaval of your inner landscape. When the man who chose meaning over comfort reached this precipice, he encountered a truth so paradoxical it almost shattered him. That growth, purpose, and true freedom emerge not from avoiding pain but through embracing it, through seeking out the discomfort that the complacent mind flees. It's a reversal of the instinct you've always trusted. Where ease seemed the goal, difficulty was the enemy. Yet history teems with those who earnestly pursued hardship as a sacred path, and in doing so, discovered a life richer and more vivid than the dulled monotony of comfort ever allowed. Consider the Stoics, epic architects of meaning amid chaos. They did not shy from suffering. They invited it, refined by the understanding that external ease is an illusion, and internal virtue the only true fortress. Seneca, imprisoned and persecuted, wrote to his friend that, as long as you live, keep learning how to live. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor burdened with unending war and political treachery, found solace and clarity in the disciplined practice of turning inward, transforming hardship into a crucible of self-mastery. Their lives were far from comfortable, yet their legacy exudes an undeniable power. A power born in the acceptance that meaning arises when you willingly walk into the storm, not away from it. Or look to Viktor Frankl, who in the depths of a Nazi concentration camp discovered a truth so profound it reshaped psychological understanding forever. Stripped of everything external, he found that the last of human freedoms was the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Frankl's meaning was forged not in comfort but in unspeakable suffering, yet it became his lifeline, the reason to endure, the beacon that carried him beyond despair. If the worst horrors could not extinguish his search for meaning, what excuse remains for you to settle for a life propped up by convenience? This shift in outlook, this radical embrace of difficulty as a gateway rather than a barrier, does not demand self-flagellation or masochistic suffering. It demands something subtler and infinitely more challenging, a fundamental reorientation of your values and assumptions. To reclaim control, you must first surrender the belief that comfort is the highest good. You must peer into the void of uncertainty, of potential pain, and recognize it not as a threat but as a necessary companion on the journey to authenticity. Imagine your mind as a garden overrun with weeds of distraction, the endless scrolling, the passive consumption, the dulling comforts that numb your senses. A radical mindset shift is akin to ripping up these weeds, not gently but firmly, exposing the soil beneath. You begin to see that comfort in its most seductive form is a deadening fog that stifles growth. Meaning, on the other hand, demands the hard earth, engagement with struggle, conflict, and sometimes failure. Yet how does one begin this reclamation? It starts with small, deliberate ruptures in your routine. Seek out voluntary discomfort, cold showers that shock your system awake, silence amid noise, fasting that reminds you of hunger's fierce clarity. These are not ends but symbolic entrances, rituals that signal to your psyche a willingness to step off the treadwheel of ease. Each act of choosing difficulty rewires your brain's craving for immediate reward, grounding you deeper in the present moment, where true meaning resides. But beyond these practices lies something even more transformative, a mental revolution that echoes through time. It is the rejection of external validation in favor of internal sovereignty. Instead of defining your worth by how comfortable your life seems, measure it by how deeply you engage with your truth, how courageously you face the uncertainties within yourself. This path demands ruthless honesty, a willingness to dismantle comforting self-delusions one by one. Who are you beneath the masks, the roles, the soothing narratives you tell yourself? Can you hold that self in the harsh light of scrutiny and still choose to live authentically? History offers you a mirror in the stories of those who walked this path before. Gandhi, who embraced poverty and fasting as tools to awaken a nation and himself. Simone Weil, who sought suffering not as punishment but as a crucible for spiritual clarity. These figures illuminate that meaning is not a trophy awarded at the end of a smooth path, but a flame kindled by intentional struggle. They teach you that by stepping into the unknown, by risking the dissolution of your comfort-bound identity, you don't lose yourself, you find yourself. This discovery is power, not the power of domination or control over others, but a quiet sovereignty over your own life. It is the realization that you are not a passive passenger, but the cartographer of your existence, capable of redrawing boundaries, rewriting narratives, and reclaiming agency stolen by the allure of comfort. Imagine the sensation of breaking free from an invisible cage, not with brute force, but with the deliberate act of seeing the bars for what they are, and stepping through. Envision a new architecture of thought where discomfort is no longer a foe but a mentor. Every challenge, every inconvenience, every moment of tension becomes a lesson, a mirror reflecting the contours of your character. You begin to move through life not seeking to avoid pain, but to harness its transformative power. Meaning ceases to be an abstract ideal and becomes a live, breathing reality, a constant companion that shapes your choices and your very being. And so, the man who chose meaning over comfort did not reject comfort outright. He saw it for what it truly was, a tool, a resource, a fleeting reprieve, not the end goal. His radical shift was to place meaning at the center of his compass, even when that meant walking through discomfort, uncertainty, and profound isolation. In doing so, he reclaimed control not from the external world, but from the internal chains forged by fear and habituation. This is the revolution you are invited into, not a grand spectacle but a quiet uprising within your own mind and spirit. And in that uprising lies the seed of a life not merely endured, but fiercely and beautifully lived. What would it mean for you to follow that path? To feel the discomfort as a call to deeper engagement, not a warning to retreat. To discover that the fortress of meaning you seek is built not upon the foundations of ease, but upon the bedrock of challenge. The answer is no longer theoretical. It is a pulse beneath your skin, a whisper of possibility that demands reckoning. The question that now burns through the silence is yours. Will you step into this unknown with open eyes and an unyielding heart? Or will you remain ensnared, trading your soul's wild flame for the flickering shadows of comfort? The choice is revolutionary. The power is yours. Look closely at the fractured lines running through your life, the moments when you chose ease over essence, when you swerved from discomfort only to find yourself trapped in a hollow calm. What if those fractures weren't flaws but fissures beckoning you toward something deeper? What if what you've long regarded as your greatest failures, your most agonizing doubts, were not the enemy of meaning but its secret architects? The man who chose meaning over comfort finally understood this. Meaning does not arrive as a prize at the end of struggle. It is not a distant star to be reached after a journey of suffering, but the very terrain you traverse when you decide to meet suffering face to face. He saw that comfort is a mirage, a shimmering promise forever out of reach because it demands stasis, sameness, the ceasing of desire and struggle. Meaning, on the other hand, is the fire that consumes the illusion of comfort, alchemizing your pain and your longing into something fierce and incandescent. In this revelation, the paradox collapses. Comfort and meaning are not opponents, but dancers entwined in the same dark ballet. To seek comfort alone is to deny the dance. To embrace meaning is to welcome discomfort as inevitable and indispensable. But here is the deepest, most unsettling truth he unearthed. The world itself does not owe you comfort. Reality is indifferent, wild, unpredictable, cold. The quest for comfort is a subtle surrender to this indifference, a retreat into small, safe bubbles of control. Meaning demands that you step beyond this bubble, into the vast unknown where certainty dissolves and your old self fractures. This is not a tragedy but a gift masked in shadow, because within this rupture lies the birth of your authentic self, stripped of illusion and carved from raw experience. The man became a sculptor of his soul, chipping away the excess comfort that dulled him, until only the essential, trembling form remained. You might ask then why the fire is worth bearing. Why choose pain when you could choose peace, or at least a semblance of peace? Because peace without meaning is a silence so oppressive that it crushes the spirit. It is the void where the self withers, a slow death by anesthesia. The man discovered that the very flame of discomfort, the relentless questions, the aching uncertainty, the gnawing hunger for something real, was a signal, not suffering's final verdict but the herald of profound life. To live meaningfully is to be awake to the fullness of existence, not just the pleasant parts. It is to say yes to the storm, knowing that beneath its dark clouds lies a clarity impossible to find in calm seas. This realization rewrote the story he told himself about his past struggles. Each failure, each night spent wrestling with despair, each moment of isolation was no longer a defeat but a pilgrimage. The wounds were not scars of shame, but maps of his passage through the wilderness toward a sacred center within. The man who chose meaning over comfort now saw his life not as a series of random events or unfortunate setbacks, but as a deliberate unfolding, a sacred choreography between chaos and consciousness. His suffering became a teacher, his discomfort, a compass guiding him toward a horizon unseen by those who chase easy comfort. And here is the final, haunting revelation. The choice between comfort and meaning is not an isolated personal dilemma. It is the axis upon which the human spirit turns. Every soul at some point must confront this crucible, and in that confrontation, the world itself is transformed. Because when you live meaningfully, you ripple outward. Your authenticity, your courage, your refusal to settle for less, all become acts of rebellion that fracture the collective numbness. The man's decision was not just his own. It was a spark igniting a quiet revolution in the very fabric of existence. So as you stand now on the edge of this revelation, a question emerges sharper than ever. What will you do with the life you have been given, the merciless, beautiful, aching gift of it? Will you retreat to the familiar shadows of comfort, dimming the fierce light within? Or will you step forward, trembling but unyielding, into the wild unknown where meaning waits like a fierce, waiting dawn? Look into the mirror of your soul and see. The man who chose meaning over comfort is not a distant figure from a story. He is you, waiting, calling, daring you to awaken. The dance begins now, not tomorrow, not when the fear subsides, but in this breath that carries both your trembling and your courage. To choose meaning is to choose life itself, the raw, unstoppable, utterly human life that demands everything and gives back more than you ever imagined. And so, in the silent theater of your mind, where shadows flicker and the heart beats a wild rhythm, hear this. Comfort is the cage, meaning is the flight. Choose to soar. The air is thin, the journey perilous, but the sky, oh, the sky is infinite.